Clara May Thornfield's knees buckled against the unforgiving Arizona dust, her 300-pound frame crashing down like a felled oak as Thunder, the gentlest horse on Broken Creek Ranch, staggered beneath her weight. The animal's legs trembled, foam flecking his muzzle, while 17 pairs of eyes from the tombstone sewing circle watched in horrified silence from the fence line. Her father wasn't supposed to love her this much. Mrs. Henderson's embroidery hoop clattered to the ground, the delicate pink roses scattering like blood drops in the dirt. The other women gasped, hands flying to their mouths as Big Sam Thornfield stepped forward, his weathered face carved from granite, casting a shadow over his fallen daughter. "Get up, Clara Bear." His voice cut through the desert air like a whip crack, though his calloused hands trembled almost imperceptibly. "You ain't earned the right to quit yet." The contradiction between his harsh words and that childhood endearment sent ice through every witness's veins. What kind of father called his daughter Bear while condemning her to such public humiliation? But none of them knew Sam Thornfield's cruelty was about to save Clara's life. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Sonoran Desert stretched endlessly beyond Broken Creek Ranch, its saguaro cacti standing like silent sentinels in the September heat of 1885. 15 miles from the silver mining chaos of Tombstone, the ranch sat in a pocket of relative civilization where dust devils danced across parched earth, and the promise of flash floods lurked behind every cloud. This was Arizona territory, where survival meant adapting to extremes and where society's rules bent under the weight of frontier necessity. Clara May Thornfield had learned early that her body was a battlefield. At 19, she carried over 300 pounds on a frame that Victorian society deemed monstrous, each curve a sin against feminine ideals. Her German-Irish heritage showed in cornflower blue eyes and wheat-colored hair that caught sunlight like spun gold, but those details disappeared beneath the judgment of a world that measured women by their ability to disappear into corsets. She possessed a brilliant mind that could repair any mechanism on the ranch and gentle the wildest horses with patience alone, yet Tombstone's residents saw only flesh where they expected delicacy. Samuel Big Sam Thornfield dominated every room he entered, his 6'4" frame scarred by Civil War battles with the 14th Indiana Infantry. At 45, he owned the largest cattle operation in 3 counties, yet his greatest treasure and deepest wound bore the same name, Clara Bear. He had buried his wife Martha 19 years ago, moments after Clara's difficult birth, and never spoke of the woman whose ghost seemed to haunt every corner of their adobe home. His poker face concealed oceans of emotion, and every evening he retreated to his study to write letters he would never send, pouring his heart onto pages destined for burning. The ranch employed 12 hands, but none drew Clara's attention like Matthew Santos, though everyone called him Miguel. 23 years old, with the lean build of a natural horseman, he possessed an unusual combination of Spanish grace and Anglo determination. His dark eyes held secrets that seemed older than his years, and when he worked alongside Clara in the stables, his gentle manner created a sanctuary where her size became irrelevant. He had appeared 2 years ago with nothing but a bedroll and skills that made him invaluable, yet he deflected questions about his past with the practiced ease of a man carrying profound loss. Dr. Cornelius Blackwood represented everything dangerous about progress wrapped in respectability. 50 years old, with silver hair and Eastern manners, he traveled territorial circuits promoting revolutionary medical treatments for feminine ailments. His black medical bag contained instruments that gleamed with promise and menace in equal measure, and his credentials bore impressive seals from Boston institutions. Yet something about his too-perfect smile and the way his eyes lingered on heavy women suggested appetites that had nothing to do with healing. The town of Tombstone buzzed with gossip about the Thornfield family, particularly the tragic beauty of Clara's isolation and her father's seemingly heartless treatment. Mrs. Henderson's sewing circle met weekly to discuss intervention strategies, while the men debated Sam's methods over whiskey and cards. None suspected that beneath their judgment lay a truth more complex than frontier society could comprehend. The humiliation began at dawn on September 15th, when Big Sam's voice cracked like thunder across the ranch yard. "Clara May Thornfield, you'll earn your keep like any hand, or you'll find yourself another place to call home." His words carried across the desert air to where the Tombstone Ladies' Auxiliary had gathered for their weekly ranch visit, ostensibly to deliver preserves, but truly to witness the spectacle they'd heard whispered about in town. Clara's attempt to mount Thunder had become the stuff of local legend within hours. The gentle sorrel gelding, known for carrying children and elderly visitors without complaint, had trembled visibly under her weight before his front legs buckled. The sight of Arizona's largest rancher's daughter sprawled in the dust while distinguished ladies watched had transformed from private family struggle into public theater. Mrs. Henderson clutched her pearl necklace so tightly the string threatened to snap, while Mrs. Garrett whispered urgent prayers that sounded more like condemnation than compassion. "Samuel Thornfield, this is barbaric," Mrs. Henderson declared, her voice shaking with righteous indignation. "Clara is a young lady, not a common laborer. She belongs in drawing rooms, not mucking stables." But Sam's granite expression never wavered as he turned his back on the gathering crowd and walked toward the house, leaving Clara to struggle to her feet alone while dust clung to her blue calico dress like shame made visible. The work began before the rooster's call the next morning. 4 o'clock found Clara stumbling through darkness toward the stables, her soft hands already blistering around the wooden handle of a manure fork. Sam had assigned her the most grueling tasks on the ranch: mucking 20 stalls, hauling water barrels that weighed nearly as much as she did, and mending fence lines under the merciless Arizona sun. Each job seemed designed to break her spirit, yet something unexpected happened in those first brutal hours. Clara discovered muscles she'd forgotten she possessed. Miguel appeared at her side like a guardian angel, though his help came wordlessly and without explanation. When she struggled to lift water barrels, he quietly positioned wooden planks to create leverage. When her hands bled from fence wire, clean bandages appeared on her workbench. When the heat threatened to overwhelm her, he ensured she worked in whatever shade the desert offered. His presence confused her more than it comforted. Why would this handsome, capable man risk Big Sam's wrath to aid the ranch's burden? By the third day, Tombstone had organized itself into factions. The Ladies' Auxiliary called an emergency meeting to discuss intervention, with Mrs. Henderson leading a charge to contact territorial authorities about what she termed paternal abuse. Reverend Matthews preached a Sunday sermon about Christian charity beginning at home that everyone understood as direct criticism of Sam Thornfield's methods. Even the ranch hands divided themselves between those who admired Clara's unexpected determination and those who whispered that Sam had finally lost his mind. But Clara began discovering something remarkable in her suffering. She was stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. The woman who had been considered too fragile for anything more strenuous than needlework found herself repairing the ranch's broken windmill with an intuitive understanding of mechanics that amazed the other workers. Her gentle touch with injured animals became legendary when she successfully treated a horse with the infected hoof that the territorial veterinarian had declared hopeless. The transformation wasn't just physical. Years of hiding in the shadows of ranch life had never given Clara the opportunity to discover her own capabilities. Now, forced into the harsh light of daily labor, she found herself thinking with a clarity that surprised her. During evening hours, exhausted but somehow more alive than she'd ever felt, she began questioning everything about her father's sudden cruelty. Why now? After 19 years of protection, why these particular tasks that seem designed to showcase her unexpected competence rather than highlight her failures? Late one evening, while replacing rotted boards in the feed room, Clara discovered something that changed everything. Hidden beneath loose planks, wrapped in oiled cloth, lay her mother's diary. Pages she'd never known existed. Martha Thornfield's elegant handwriting revealed truths that made Clara's blood run cold. September 12, 1866. Cornelius grows more insistent about his treatments for my condition. I've seen his work in Boston. Women who trusted him never returned home. If anything happens to me during Clara's birth, Samuel must keep our daughter away from my brother. He believes size equals death, and he'll kill her trying to prove otherwise. The diary trembled in Clara's hands as the pieces fell into terrible place. Dr. Blackwood wasn't just any traveling physician. He was her uncle, Martha's brother, and somehow her father knew he was coming. Every brutal day of labor, every public humiliation, every moment of seeming cruelty had been preparation for something far worse than community judgment. Sam Thornfield wasn't breaking his daughter's spirit. He was forging it into something strong enough to survive what was coming. As if summoned by her discovery, the sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed across the ranch yard, and Clara knew with sinking certainty that her real test was about to begin. Dr. Cornelius Blackwood arrived at Broken Creek Ranch like a storm wrapped in respectability, his black carriage gleaming despite the desert dust and his eastern clothes immaculate in the brutal September heat. Clara watched from the barn doorway as he stepped down with practiced elegance, his silver hair catching sunlight and his smile revealing teeth too perfect for a man who'd spent years on territorial circuits. Behind him, two assistants unloaded mysterious wooden crates marked with symbols that made her stomach clench with inexplicable dread. "Samuel, my old friend," Blackwood called across the yard, his voice carrying the cultured tones of Boston society. "I've come as promised, though I confess the situation appears worse than your letters indicated." His gaze found Clara with the precision of a predator identifying prey, and she felt stripped naked under his clinical assessment. Every curve, every pound, every imperfection seemed catalogued in that moment of examination that lasted far too long for medical propriety. Big Sam emerged from the house with an expression Clara had never seen before, resignation mixed with something that looked dangerously close to desperation. "Doc Blackwood, you made good time from Tucson. Clara, come meet the gentleman who's going to help you." The words sounded like sawdust in his mouth, and Clara noticed how his hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he spoke. This wasn't the confident rancher who'd built an empire from desert scrubland. This was a man being forced into an impossible choice. The consultation took place in the parlor, where Martha's portrait watched from above the mantel with eyes that seemed to hold warnings Clara couldn't interpret. Blackwood arranged his medical instruments on the mahogany table with ceremonial precision, gleaming devices that belonged more in a torture chamber than a healing practice. His voice carried hypnotic authority as he explained his revolutionary European methodology that had allegedly helped dozens of women achieve feminine perfection through scientific intervention. "The process requires 30 days of intensive treatment," Blackwood explained, producing photographs of supposed success stories that made Clara's skin crawl. The before images showed women who resembled her in size and desperation, while the after pictures revealed gaunt faces with hollow eyes that spoke of suffering rather than triumph. Complete isolation is essential. Emotional interference from family members often sabotages the delicate work of transformation. Clara found her voice despite the fear closing her throat. "Where are these women now? I'd like to speak with them about their experiences." Blackwood's smile flickered for just an instant, revealing something predatory beneath the professional facade. Unfortunately, my patients value their privacy highly. The transformation is so complete that they prefer to start fresh lives elsewhere, away from those who knew them in their previous unfortunate condition. The cost, when finally revealed, struck Clara like a physical blow. $2,000, the exact amount she'd overheard the bank manager demanding for the ranch's delinquent mortgage. Blackwood's timing wasn't coincidental, it was surgical in its precision. Her father faced losing everything he'd built, unless Clara submitted to treatment that looked increasingly sinister with each passing moment. Miguel's reaction to Blackwood's presence bordered on violence. Clara found him in the stables that evening, methodically sharpening his knife with strokes that suggested he was imagining it cutting through more than leather. "You can't trust him, Clara," he said without looking up, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't identify. "There's something about him that ain't right. Something that makes my skin crawl." When she pressed for details, Miguel's face contorted with frustration that seemed deeply personal. "I can't explain it proper, but I've seen men like him before. They take broken things and make them worse, then call it healing." His dark eyes met hers with intensity that took her breath away. "Promise me you won't let him touch you. Promise me you'll fight if he tries." That night, Clara lay awake, listening to muffled voices from her father's study. The conversation between Sam and Blackwood carried undertones of threat and desperation that chilled her more than the desert night air. Through thin walls, she caught fragments that made her blood freeze. "The girl's condition is worse than expected. Treatment must begin immediately, or the consequences. Your debt situation leaves you little choice in the matter." The breaking point came when Clara discovered Blackwood examining her personal belongings without permission. She found him in her bedroom, holding her mother's jewelry box with fingers that lingered too long on each piece. "Such lovely things," he murmured, not bothering to pretend embarrassment at being caught. "Martha always had exquisite taste. It's tragic how thoroughly her daughter has failed to inherit her refinement." The casual cruelty in his voice revealed the man beneath the medical facade. This wasn't about healing, it was about power, control, and something far more sinister than Clara could yet comprehend. When she demanded he leave her room, Blackwood's response chilled her to the bone. "Soon enough, my dear niece, you'll have no room to call your own. Treatment requires complete surrender of autonomy. Your father has already signed the necessary papers." Clara's world tilted on its axis as the truth crashed over her. Uncle, the man who'd supposedly died years ago, had returned to claim her, and her father appeared powerless to stop him. The ranch, the debt, the timing, everything had been orchestrated to leave her vulnerable and Sam desperate enough to sacrifice his daughter's life for financial survival. As sunset painted the desert crimson, Dr. Blackwood announced that treatment would begin the following morning. Clara had one night to decide whether to fight or surrender, knowing that either choice might destroy the only family she'd ever known. The woman who'd discovered her strength through brutal labor now faced a test that would require every ounce of courage she'd never known she possessed. The basement beneath Broken Creek Ranch had never been intended for medical procedures. Clara descended the wooden steps at dawn, her legs trembling with each creak of the boards, while Dr. Blackwood guided her toward what he called his treatment facility. The root cellar had been transformed overnight into something that belonged in her worst nightmares rather than a healing space. Leather restraints hung from a modified examination table, and glass jars filled with mysterious liquids lined makeshift shelves. The air reeked of carbolic acid, mixed with something sweet and rotten that made her stomach revolt. "The initial phase requires complete cooperation," Blackwood explained as his assistants arranged instruments that gleamed with menacing purpose. "Resistance only prolongs the necessary suffering." Clara's eyes fixed on 17 leather straps attached to the table, 17 opportunities for him to render her helpless. When she hesitated at the threshold, one assistant placed a firm hand on her shoulder while Blackwood's smile never wavered. The first treatment session shattered every illusion Clara had harbored about medical science. Blackwood induced violent vomiting through powdered ipecac while simultaneously applying electrical stimulation to her abdomen with a device he claimed would dissolve fatty deposits through galvanic action. The pain was indescribable. But worse was the clinical detachment in his voice as he documented her suffering. "Patient exhibits expected resistance to metabolic acceleration," he dictated to his assistant. "Increase voltage by 2 increments." Above ground, Big Sam paced the ranch yard like a caged animal, his face carved from granite but his hands betraying the tremor that revealed his inner torment. When Mrs. Henderson arrived with the ladies' auxiliary demanding to see Clara, Sam blocked their path with his massive frame. "She's indisposed," he growled, though the screams from below made his explanation a mockery. "Doc Blackwood says the treatment can't be interrupted." Miguel's attempts at intervention nearly resulted in violence. He confronted Sam outside the barn, his usually controlled demeanor cracking under emotional pressure. "You can't let this continue," he pleaded, grabbing Sam's shirt with desperate hands. "Whatever he's paying you, whatever he's threatening, it ain't worth Clara's life." Sam's response was to physically restrain Miguel while Clara's agonized cries echoed from the basement. "You don't understand the situation, boy. Sometimes a father's love looks like betrayal to everyone else." The townspeople gathered in increasing numbers as word spread of Clara's treatment. Reverend Matthews led prayer circles in the ranch yard, while Dr. Peterson from Tombstone demanded professional consultation with Blackwood. The territorial doctor was turned away at gunpoint by Sam himself, who announced that anyone interfering with Clara's treatment would face the business end of his rifle. The community watched in horror as their respected rancher transformed into something unrecognizable. By the 4th day, Clara's physical deterioration was visible to anyone who glimpsed her during brief moments between sessions. Rapid weight loss through dehydration and starvation had given her a gaunt appearance that Blackwood photographed obsessively for his documentation. Her skin hung loose in places, and her eyes held the hollow look of someone whose spirit was being systematically broken. Yet beneath the suffering, something unexpected was happening. Clara was discovering reserves of mental strength she'd never known existed. The psychological torture proved more devastating than physical pain. Blackwood forced her to recite confessions of gluttony while applying his electrical devices, demanding that she acknowledge her sins against feminine virtue and beg for purification. "You understand now why your mother died," he whispered during one particularly brutal session. "She carried the same weakness, the same moral failing that has consumed you. I'm saving you from her fate." Miguel's desperation reached breaking point when he attempted to smuggle food through Clara's basement window. The meager supplies, bread wrapped in cloth, a jar of honey, precious water, represented more than sustenance. They were proof that someone still cared whether she lived or died. The brief moments when she could see his face through the small opening became her only connection to hope, until Sam discovered the aid and banished Miguel from the ranch entirely. "You're making this harder for her," Sam told Miguel as he escorted him off the property. "Every kindness makes her think rescue is possible. Sometimes mercy means letting go." Miguel's response was to swing wildly at the older man, missing completely as emotion overwhelmed his coordination. "You're letting him kill her!" he shouted as Sam's men physically removed him. "When she dies, her blood is on your hands." The discovery that changed everything came on the 5th night when Clara found the loose floorboard in her basement prison. Beneath the rotting wood lay a cache of letters in her father's distinctive handwriting, hidden where only someone confined to the cellar might find them. Years of daily correspondence revealed the truth that shattered her understanding of everything she'd endured. "My dearest Clara Bear, read the most recent entry, dated just days before Blackwood's arrival. Every harsh word I've spoken cuts my heart deeper than yours. If I could trade my soul to spare you one moment of pain, I'd make that deal with the devil himself. But your uncle is coming, and I know what he did to your mother. The only way to save you is to make you strong enough to survive what I cannot prevent. Letter after letter revealed the elaborate deception Sam had constructed. The brutal ranch work hadn't been punishment, it had been training. Every impossible task had been designed to build the physical and mental fortitude Clara would need to survive Blackwood's treatment. The public humiliation had been calculated to lower the community's guard while positioning Clara as a victim worth saving. Even the financial crisis was orchestrated. Sam had taken loans against the ranch to create the appearance of desperation while secretly gathering evidence against Blackwood. I know what Cornelius did in Boston, one letter revealed. The women who trusted him never came home. But you're stronger than Martha was, stronger than any of us realized. Hold on, Clara Bear. Daddy's coming for you, but first you have to prove you can survive what's coming. The revelation transformed Clara's understanding of her father's apparent betrayal into recognition of the most complex act of love she'd ever witnessed. Sam had sacrificed his reputation, his relationship with his daughter, and his standing in the community to prepare her for a trial he couldn't prevent but refused to let destroy her. Every moment of seeming cruelty had been an investment in her survival. Meanwhile, Blackwood's treatment entered what he called the final phase. His techniques became increasingly violent as Clara's unexpected resilience frustrated his expectations. The woman who should have been broken by now instead showed signs of defiance that enraged him. Your mother was more cooperative, he snarled during one session. She understood the necessity of surrendering to superior knowledge. Clara's response shocked them both. My mother died fighting you, she said through gritted teeth, and I'll die the same way if necessary. The strength in her voice, despite everything she'd endured, revealed that Sam's gamble was succeeding. Blackwood's treatments had failed to break her spirit. Instead, they had forged it into something harder than desert stone. The basement had become a battlefield where 3 generations of family trauma played out in blood and tears. Martha's death, Sam's guilt, Clara's survival, all centered on one man's twisted interpretation of love and healing. As Blackwood prepared for the surgical intervention he claimed would complete Clara's transformation, neither he nor his patient knew that above ground, forces were gathering that would determine whether his final experiment succeeded or became his last. Clara counted the hours until dawn when Blackwood had promised to begin procedures that would either perfect her or kill her in the attempt. In her father's letters, she'd found the strength to endure. Now she would discover whether that strength was enough to help her escape the tomb that was supposed to be her salvation. The Arizona monsoon arrived like divine intervention on the night Blackwood announced his final procedure. Clara watched through her basement window as lightning split the desert sky in jagged scars, while thunder shook the ranch house to its foundations. Flash flood warnings echoed across the territory as dry arroyos transformed into raging torrents, cutting off escape routes and trapping everyone at Broken Creek Ranch in nature's violent embrace. Perfect timing, Blackwood murmured as he prepared surgical instruments that gleamed with malevolent purpose in the lamplight. The storm will mask any unfortunate sounds from tonight's work. Your transformation will be complete by dawn, my dear niece, one way or another. His assistants arranged restraints with practiced efficiency while Clara's heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Above ground, Sam Thornfield sat in his study with a bottle of whiskey, playing the role of grieving father preparing to lose his daughter to necessary medicine. His performance was masterful. Every gesture spoke of resignation to forces beyond his control. But Clara had read his letters, and she recognized the careful positioning of his chair near the gun cabinet. the way his eyes tracked every sound from below. The tension coiled in his shoulders like a spring ready to release. The basement began flooding as the storm intensified, muddy water seeping through stone foundations and pooling around the examination table legs. Blackwood cursed the inconvenience while ordering his assistants to elevate his equipment. But Clara saw opportunity in the rising water. Her size, which had been a source of shame for 19 years, might finally become an advantage in the swift current that was beginning to flow across the cellar floor. "The procedure cannot be delayed," Blackwood declared as water reached his ankles. "The patient's condition has deteriorated beyond safe postponement." He produced a scalpel that caught lightning flashes through the window, transforming it into a silver fang ready to tear flesh. "Secure her to the table immediately before the flooding worsens." Clara's escape attempt began when the first assistant slipped on wet stones, giving her precious seconds to break free from their grip. Years of ranch work had built muscle beneath her soft exterior, and desperation gave her strength she'd never known she possessed. She crashed through Blackwood's instrument table, scattering surgical tools into rising water while the doctor screamed orders his men couldn't hear over thunder. The confrontation that followed revealed truths that had festered in darkness for 2 decades. Blackwood pursued Clara through flooding tunnels that connected the basement to natural caves beneath the ranch, his medical facade finally stripped away to reveal the monster underneath. "You killed my sister!" he screamed as water swirled around their knees. "Martha died because she was too fat to survive childbirth, just like you'll die unless I save you from her fate." Clara's response came from depths of understanding she'd only recently discovered. "You killed her yourself!" she shouted back, dodging his wild grab for her throat. "Mother's diary told me everything. You were drunk during my birth, too jealous of her happiness to save her life." The accusation hit Blackwood like a physical blow, and his confession spilled out in the chaos of rising water and flashing lightning. "She chose him over me," Blackwood raged, advancing through water that now reached their waists. "Chose that frontier savage over her own brother who worshipped her. I was drunk, yes, but she deserved to die for rejecting my love. Every fat woman I see Martha laughing at me, choosing someone else." His admission of murder, mixed with declarations of twisted love, created a portrait of madness that explained 20 years of hidden pain. The basement door crashed open as Sam and Miguel burst through together, their previous conflicts forgotten in the face of Clara's mortal danger. Miguel's presence shocked Clara almost as much as her father's rescue attempt. She'd thought him banished forever, yet here he was, soaked and desperate, fighting through flooding water to reach her side. "Let her go, Cornelius," Sam commanded, his rifle trained on the doctor despite the risk of hitting Clara in the swirling chaos. "Your quarrel was with Martha and me, not with an innocent girl." But Blackwood had passed beyond reason into pure vengeance, pulling a derringer from his medical bag and pressing it against Clara's temple as lightning illuminated their deadly tableau. "She's Martha's spawn," Blackwood snarled, backing toward the flooded stairs with Clara as his shield. "Every breath she takes mocks my sister's memory. I'll perfect her or destroy her, but I won't let her live to become the same disgusting creature that killed the only woman I ever loved." His confession of incestuous obsession with Martha finally revealed the true source of his hatred for Clara. Miguel's desperate charge through rising water created the distraction Clara needed. As her protector crashed into Blackwood's legs, the gun discharged harmlessly into stone ceiling, and Clara found herself free in water that was now deep enough to carry her toward the narrow cave opening she'd spotted during their struggle. Her size, which Blackwood saw as weakness, allowed her to float in current that swept lighter bodies against unyielding rocks. The gunshot that echoed through flooded caves came from Sam's rifle, but his target wasn't Blackwood. It was the wooden support beam that had held back tons of accumulated rainwater in natural chambers above. The resulting deluge swept all four combatants toward different passages, separating them in a maze of underground waterways that had been carved by centuries of flash floods. Clara found herself alone in darkness, carried by current through passages that seemed designed by Providence to deliver her from evil. Behind her, she could hear Blackwood's screams fading into distance as water swept him toward chambers from which no echo returned. The desert had claimed its own justice on the man who'd violated its daughters. When she finally dragged herself onto dry stone in a cave that opened to starlight, Clara realized the storm was passing and dawn approached. Her ordeal in the basement seemed like another lifetime, though her body bore fresh wounds from Blackwood's final assault. More importantly, her spirit had survived intact, forged by her father's calculated cruelty into something strong enough to endure what lesser souls could not. Miguel found her there as sunrise painted the desert in shades of hope. But the words he spoke as he gathered her into his arms changed everything she thought she understood about love, family, and the strange currents that had brought them all together. "Hermana," he whispered, using the Spanish word for sister as tears mixed with floodwater on his face. "I promised Mama I'd watch over you, Clara. I've been your brother since the day you were born." The revelation that Miguel was Martha's son from her first marriage transformed Clara's understanding of every gentle kindness he'd shown her. Romance dissolved into something deeper, the protective love of family reunited after years of separation. As they helped each other climb toward daylight, Clara realized that surviving Blackwood's treatment was only the beginning of discoveries that would reshape her entire world. The bullet had found its mark in Big Sam's chest as he struggled to save Clara from the flooding basement, and now he lay dying in the ranch house parlor while the territorial doctor worked frantically to extract lead from tissue too close to his heart. Clara knelt beside the bed where her father's massive frame seemed suddenly fragile, his weathered hands trembling as she read aloud from the stack of letters he'd written but never sent. 19 years of love poured onto pages that smelled of ink and regret. "My dearest Clara Bear," she whispered, her voice breaking over words that revealed the depth of sacrifice she'd never understood. "Every harsh word I've spoken cuts my heart deeper than yours. You are my greatest treasure and my deepest failure, the daughter I loved too much to lose and too little to save properly." Sam's eyes fluttered open at the sound of his own words, and tears leaked down cheeks that had been carved by desert sun and grief. The community that had judged Sam's methods now gathered in vigil outside the ranch house, their earlier condemnation transformed into horrified understanding. Mrs. Henderson led prayers for the man she'd called barbaric just days before, while Reverend Matthews struggled to find words that could encompass the complexity of paternal love disguised as cruelty. The ladies' auxiliary brought food that no one could eat, their usual gossip replaced by uncomfortable silence as they grappled with their own complicity in Clara's suffering. Miguel paced the parlor like a caged animal, his newly revealed identity as Clara's half-brother, adding layers of complexity to grief that already threatened to overwhelm him. "I should have told you sooner," he confessed to Sam during one of the older man's brief conscious moments. "Should have helped you carry this burden instead of making you face Blackwood alone." Sam's response was barely audible. "You were protecting her the only way you knew how, son. That's what family does." Dr. Peterson from Tombstone worked with equipment that seemed primitive compared to Blackwood's elaborate instruments, but his hands moved with genuine healing intent rather than destructive purpose. "The bullets lodged against his heart," he explained to Clara and Miguel during a brief consultation. "Surgery might kill him, but leaving it there certainly will. He's got hours, maybe less." The medical reality was stark, but Clara had learned to find strength in impossible circumstances. The financial crisis that had provided Blackwood's leverage evaporated like desert rain when territorial authorities discovered the extent of his crimes. A strongbox in his carriage contained thousands of dollars stolen from victims across 3 territories, along with legal documents that revealed the ranch debt had been artificially created through forged papers. Sam's apparent desperation had been as carefully constructed as every other element of his plan to save Clara's life. Yet even as external pressures lifted, the emotional weight of deception threatened to crush what remained of the Thornfield family. Clara struggled to reconcile the father who'd loved her enough to endure community hatred with the man who'd stood by while she suffered Blackwood's torture. "How could you let him hurt me?" she whispered during one of Sam's lucid moments. "How could love look so much like betrayal?" Sam's explanation came in fragments between labored breaths, each word costing him precious strength. "Blackwood would have killed you quick if he thought you were weak," he gasped. "Had to make you strong enough to survive what I couldn't prevent. Had to make him think he was breaking you while you were really breaking free." The logic was sound, but it couldn't heal the trauma of believing herself unloved during her darkest hours. Miguel's revelation of his true identity created its own crisis of understanding. The romantic feelings Clara had developed for the gentle ranch hand transformed into confusion about family bonds she'd never known existed. "Mama made me promise to watch over her daughter," Miguel explained to Sam while Clara listened from the doorway. "But I never told Clara who I was because I knew it would complicate everything. Sometimes protection means staying in the shadows." The approaching death of the only father Clara had ever known forced conversations that should have happened years earlier. Sam confessed his guilt over Martha's death, admitting that he'd blamed himself for not recognizing Blackwood's dangerous obsession with his sister. "I loved your mother too much to see the poison in her brother," he whispered. "When she died, I swore I'd never let him near you. But money can trap a man worse than any cage." As sunset painted the ranch in shades of ending, Clara faced the possibility of losing the father whose love she'd just learned to understand. The man who'd shaped her strength through calculated cruelty now lay broken, his life bleeding away while she finally grasped the complexity of sacrifice disguised as abandonment. The ranch that had been her prison might soon become her inheritance, but only if she could find a way to forgive the unforgivable and understand that sometimes love required enduring the appearance of its opposite. Outside, coyotes called across the desert as stars appeared in skies cleared by the storm, and Clara realized that her real test wasn't surviving Blackwood's treatment. It was learning to live with the knowledge that love could wear the mask of cruelty when survival demanded impossible choices. The truth about Martha's death emerged from Sam's fevered confessions like poison drawn from an infected wound. As his life ebbed away in the lamplight of the parlor, he revealed the complete story that had shaped 19 years of careful deception. Martha hadn't simply died in childbirth. She'd been murdered by her own brother during Clara's delivery, poisoned with experimental drugs that Blackwood administered in a jealous rage when she chose Sam over his twisted affections. "Cornelius was obsessed with your mother from childhood," Sam whispered, his voice growing weaker with each revelation. "When she married her first husband and had Miguel, he convinced himself it was temporary madness. But when she chose me, after being widowed, he couldn't bear the rejection. He came to deliver you drunk and furious, gave her something he claimed would ease the birth pains." Sam's hand found Clara's, gripping with desperate strength. "She lived long enough to name you and warn me about him, and made me promise to keep both her children safe from his madness." The network of surviving women that Clara had glimpsed in Blackwood's photographs materialized like spirits seeking justice when news of his death spread across the territories. They arrived at Broken Creek Ranch in wagons and on horseback, dozens of females who'd been reported dead or missing over the past decade, all bearing scars from his treatments, and stories that painted a picture of systematic torture disguised as medical care. Their testimonies revealed that Blackwood hadn't been killing women outright. He'd been selling them to brothels and mining camps after breaking their spirits through abuse. "He told my family I died during treatment," sobbed one woman who identified herself as Rebecca Cartwright from New Mexico Territory. "Said my body was too damaged to return home. I've been trapped in a mining camp for 3 years, believing my own parents thought I was dead." Her story echoed through the gathered survivors, each woman's testimony adding another layer to the horror of Blackwood's enterprise. Miguel's true parentage became clear through documents found in Blackwood's carriage, papers that revealed Martha's first marriage to Carlos Santos, a Spanish settler who died defending his ranch from Apache raiders. Miguel had been 5 years old when his mother remarried Sam Thornfield, but Blackwood's objections to the union had forced them to hide the boy's existence to protect him from his uncle's jealous rage. "You were never meant to be separated," Sam told Clara and Miguel as they sat together beside his deathbed. "But Cornelius threatened to kill the boy if Martha acknowledged him publicly. We planned to reunite you when you were older, when he was strong enough to protect himself." The financial conspiracy that had created the ranch's debt crisis unraveled when territorial authorities examined Blackwood's records. He'd been systematically targeting families with vulnerable daughters, using forged documents and corrupt bank officials to create artificial financial pressures that forced desperate parents to accept his help. Sam's apparent desperation had been performance art designed to make Blackwood believe his manipulation was succeeding while actually gathering evidence of the broader criminal network. "There's over $50,000 in stolen money," reported Deputy Marshal Williams as he inventoried Blackwood's belongings. "Property deeds, banknotes, even family heirlooms taken from victims across 3 territories. Looks like he was planning to expand his operation into California before you stopped him." The revelation that Clara's suffering had helped expose crimes affecting dozens of families gave meaning to trauma that had seemed purely personal. Yet the most devastating truth emerged when Martha's diary revealed the full extent of family secrets hidden for 2 decades. Blackwood's obsession with his sister had begun in childhood, manifesting as protective love that gradually twisted into possessive control. Martha's marriage to Carlos Santos had been an attempt to escape her brother's suffocating attention, but his threats against her children had trapped her in a web of fear that lasted until her death. "He convinced me that fat women die in childbirth because of our family history," Martha had written in her final entries. "But I've seen his work in Boston. He kills them himself and blames their size. If anything happens to me, Samuel must know that Cornelius believes murder is mercy. He'll come for Clara when she's old enough, convinced he's saving her from my fate." The community's understanding of the Thornfield family transformed completely as these revelations spread through Tombstone. Mrs. Henderson wept openly as she realized how her interference had nearly prevented Sam's plan from succeeding, while Reverend Matthews struggled to comprehend the moral complexity of love expressed through apparent cruelty. "How do we judge a father who broke his daughter's heart to save her life?" he asked during an emergency church meeting. "What do we call sacrifice that looks like betrayal?" Miguel's internal struggle with his identity reached a breaking point as he watched his stepfather dying and his half-sister processing trauma that would scar her forever. "I wanted to tell you who I was," he confessed to Clara as they maintained their vigil. "Every day I watched you feeling alone and unloved, knowing I could ease that pain with 3 words. I'm your brother. But Sam made me promise to stay silent until Blackwood was dealt with. Said knowing about family would make you vulnerable to his manipulation." The romantic feelings Clara had developed for Miguel complicated their reunion in ways that tortured them both. Learning that her deepest emotional connection was with her brother, rather than a potential husband, created confusion about love, family, and the difference between different types of affection. "I thought I was falling in love," she admitted during one of their difficult conversations. "But maybe I was just recognizing family bonds I'd never known existed." Clara's transformation through suffering became evident as she took charge of caring for both Sam and the arriving survivors. The woman who'd been considered too fragile for ranch work now organized medical care, food distribution, and testimony collection with competence that amazed everyone who witnessed it. "Blackwood tried to break her," observed Dr. Peterson, "but instead he forged her into something stronger than any of us imagined possible." As Sam's condition deteriorated beyond hope, he made final arrangements that revealed the depth of his planning for Clara's future. Hidden assets, carefully preserved despite apparent financial crisis, would fund a sanctuary for women escaping abuse, transforming Broken Creek Ranch from a place of suffering into a refuge for healing. "This land has seen too much pain," he whispered to Clara and Miguel. "Time to make it a place where broken things get mended instead of broken further." The approaching death of her father forced Clara to confront forgiveness that seemed impossible yet necessary. Could she forgive the man who'd let her believe herself unloved while she endured torture? Could she understand that his cruelty had been love expressed in the only way that might save her life? The answers would determine not just her relationship with Sam's memory, but her ability to build a future from the ashes of systematic deception designed to preserve what mattered most. Outside, dawn approached with the promise of endings and beginnings, while inside the ranch house, 3 broken souls prepared to say goodbye to the architect of their survival. Sam Thornfield died as the first rays of desert sunrise painted the ranch house walls gold, his massive hand still clasped in Clara's smaller one, while Miguel held vigil from the opposite side of the bed. His final words were barely audible. "Love ain't measured in pounds, Clara Bear. It's measured in moments like these." The man who'd built an empire from desert scrubland and sacrificed his reputation to save his daughter's life slipped away peacefully, surrounded by the family he'd fought so desperately to protect. The funeral 3 days later became a community reckoning with their own judgment and the complexity of paternal love. Reverend Matthews delivered a eulogy that acknowledged Sam's methods while honoring his intentions, speaking to a congregation that included not just Tombstone residents, but the dozens of women Blackwood had victimized across 3 territories. "We stand before a man who chose to be hated rather than helpless," the Reverend declared. "Who accepted condemnation rather than watch evil triumph over innocence." Clara found herself inheriting not just the ranch, but a purpose she'd never imagined. The financial assets Sam had hidden during his performance of desperation proved substantial enough to transform Broken Creek into something unprecedented in Arizona territory, a sanctuary where women escaping abuse could find safety, work, and the chance to rebuild shattered lives. "This land has seen enough suffering," she announced to the gathered survivors. "Time to make it a place where broken spirits get mended." Miguel's role in this new enterprise evolved naturally from protective brother to operational partner. His skills with horses and understanding of ranch management complemented Clara's mechanical abilities and natural leadership, creating a team that could handle both the practical and emotional challenges of their mission. "We're not just running a ranch," he told the first group of women who chose to stay. "We're building proof that survival can lead to something better than just existing." The transformation of Broken Creek Ranch into the Thornfield Women's Sanctuary drew attention from across the Southwest. Territorial newspapers wrote feature stories about the innovative cooperative model, where survivors worked alongside each other to operate a profitable cattle operation while healing from trauma. Clara's approach emphasized practical skills over charitable dependency, teaching women to repair equipment, manage livestock, and handle finances that would prepare them for independent futures. Mrs. Henderson became an unexpected ally in this endeavor, using her influence with the Ladies' Auxiliary to establish supply lines and political support for the sanctuary. "I judged Sam Thornfield harshly," she admitted during a public speech in Tombstone, "but watching Clara transform pain into purpose has taught me the difference between charity and empowerment. These women aren't victims, they're survivors, building something remarkable." The legal resolution of Blackwood's crimes took months to complete as authorities traced his network across multiple territories. The recovered assets funded not just the sanctuary, but compensation for families who'd lost daughters to his schemes. Clara testified before territorial judges, with a composure that impressed seasoned lawmen, her account of survival providing crucial evidence that ensured justice for dozens of victims. Romance found its way to the ranch through unexpected channels. Miguel's marriage to Sarah, one of the sanctuary's founding residents, celebrated the possibility of love emerging from shared healing rather than dramatic rescue. Their wedding became a community festival that demonstrated how the ranch had evolved from a place of isolation into a center of connection and hope. Clara served as maid of honor, her joy for her brother's happiness uncomplicated by the romantic confusion that had once troubled them. Clara's own path to personal fulfillment surprised everyone, including herself. Rather than seeking traditional marriage, she discovered profound satisfaction in mentoring young women who arrived at the sanctuary carrying wounds similar to those she'd endured. Her ability to understand self-hatred while teaching self-acceptance made her uniquely effective at guiding others through the journey from victim to survivor to leader. The ranch prospered under cooperative management, becoming known throughout Arizona territory for producing both high-quality cattle and confident women who went on to establish businesses, teach in schools, and advocate for legal reforms. The Thornfield model influenced similar sanctuaries across the Southwest, proving that social innovation could emerge from personal tragedy when survivors chose to transform rather than simply endure their experiences. 5 years after Sam's death, Clara stood in the cemetery where 3 generations of Thornfield family members rested beneath desert sky. Her father's headstone bore the inscription she'd chosen: "He loved too much to let the world break what mattered most." Beside it, a smaller marker honored Martha Thornfield Santos, acknowledging both her marriages and her children with words that celebrated rather than mourned her interrupted life. The thriving community that surrounded Clara reflected the truth Sam had died believing, that strength could emerge from suffering when love provided the foundation for endurance. The ranch that had been her prison became her platform for helping others escape their own captivity. The body that had been her shame became the vessel for work that required both physical capability and emotional resilience. Miguel's children called her Tia Clara and learned from her the same lessons about inner strength that Sam had taught through his elaborate deception. The next generation would grow up understanding that love sometimes wore masks of severity, that protection could look like abandonment, and that the strongest people were often those who'd survived attempts to break them. As sunset painted the desert in familiar shades of ending and beginning, Clara walked through the sanctuary where women worked alongside each other with the easy confidence of those who'd discovered their own worth. The sound of laughter echoed across land that had once witnessed only suffering, and Clara knew that her father's sacrifice had achieved something greater than mere survival. It had created a legacy of healing that would outlast all of them. The girl who'd collapsed in the dust 5 years earlier had become a woman who helped others rise, and in that transformation lay the true measure of Sam Thornfield's love. Not in the harshness that had forged her strength, but in the strength that enabled her to forge hope from the materials of despair. Sometimes the greatest love looks like the greatest betrayal. Clara's story reminds us that parents often carry impossible burdens, making choices that seem cruel but spring from desperate protection. How many of us have misunderstood a father's harsh words or a mother's strict rules, only to realize years later they were shields against dangers we couldn't see? Sam Thornfield endured his community's hatred and his daughter's pain because sometimes saving someone means letting them think you've abandoned them. In our golden years, we understand that parenting isn't about being liked. It's about raising children strong enough to survive what we can't prevent. Clara discovered that her father's cruelest moments were actually his most loving, that every harsh word was a brick in the fortress he built around her heart. Today's parents face different dragons than frontier fathers, but the principle remains. Love sometimes wears the mask of disappointment to teach resilience. The hands that push us to be stronger are often the same hands that catch us when we fall. Clara's transformation from victim to protector shows us that our deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths, and that understanding comes with time and perspective we didn't have when we needed it most. What harsh parenting moment do you now understand was actually love in disguise? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision for your children's good that they couldn't understand at the time? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help another parent or adult child find peace with their past.